New York Rangers offseason has officially begun as Chris Drury is starting to make a few moves. I wouldn't say that anything that happened here was overly significant, but certainly you can tell the direction that he's looking to go towards. Keep in mind that this is a unique year with the Seattle Kraken coming into the NHL as the 32nd team. We saw Vegas as the 31st team going into the 17-18 season, where the Rangers were pretty much unaffected there as well, where they lost Oscar Lindberg, who is no longer in the NHL. And Oscar Lindberg was a solid Ranger, good bottom six, more of a fourth line guy. And at the time, felt like maybe that could be somewhat of a loss, but as it turns out, it wasn't. But as far as the here and now, the Rangers made a couple of trades as we saw a lot of activity in the NHL as teams are gearing up for their protected lists and who they're going to leave available and things like that. More so, it's different this time than it was with Vegas, where there's a lot of good players available. Part of the reason being is if their cap hits are exorbitant or, like Carey Price, for example, was left exposed by Montreal. But it doesn't mean that Seattle is necessarily going to go in that direction. In fact, I kind of think that they won't. But as far as the Rangers, they trade for the rights of Tampa Bay forward Barclay Goodrow. Goodrow, who I've spoken about, was a key piece to the Lightning's success on a line with Yanni Gordon, Blake Coleman. Honestly, in some ways, it was like even more than a third line. They were relied upon in a major way. Now, could you say Goodrow is like the third most important piece of that line? Yeah. I don't think that would be argued, but I think Tampa Bay fans love Goodrow. Now, Goodrow was an undrafted guy, was on San Jose for a few years, and had a very memorable Game 7 overtime winner against Vegas in a very controversial game between the Sharks and the Golden Knights in 2019. He's come up clutch in the past. He was actually in a Ranger developmental camp back in like 2012. So there is some ties to Goodrow. Keep in mind here, they have, exclusive negotiating rights with Goodrow until July 28th. So if they don't work a deal within the next 10 days, he becomes a free agent. They gave up a 7th round pick in 2022. So a very small price to pay. So let's say they don't get Goodrow. All you lost is a 7th round pick. So not a huge deal. I'm fine with this particular trade. I'm happy about it. And I like that this is the type of player that they're trying to target. The one thing I think will be interesting, and we'll find this out again within the next 10 days, is if they do sign him, what will that contract be? There's a lot of interest in Goodrow around the league. There really is. So this could be a fairly sizable contract. I hope it's not, but it's definitely not going to be on the cheap. This is someone that can play in all facets. Mainly, though, he's more of a penalty killer, heart and soul. You're going to want to use him against, other teams' top lines. And the Rangers need a guy like that. He can play center or a wing. I think on Tampa, certainly with Gord at center, he was more on the wing. So, but at least to have that versatility is good. And Goodrow, everything being equal, is seemingly, granted, he was on a very good Tampa team, but he was a key piece and a reason why they got over the hump twice. He's a winner and a guy that you want on your team. So I think he will be, when all is said and done, I believe that Chris Drury and Goodrow and his agent will find a way to finalize this deal. I'm excited about it. But again, before we make full judgments, let's first see what the contract looks at. But in first blush, I like it. Another trade the Rangers made. Brett Howden traded to Vegas for a 2022 fourth and a player, I believe his name is Nick DeSimone. That was more so Vegas could be compliant roster-wise. I guess bringing Howden in, I assume, may have brought them to a point of, overextending a maximum. So DeSimone is an irrelevant piece. But 4th rounder for Howden in 2022. And look, Brett Howden, it didn't work out with the Rangers. He was a piece that they acquired in that Ryan McDonagh, JT Miller, Tampa Bay Lightning trade. Now, in year one, I liked Howden. It just felt like he was rushed. I think he could have used some time with an AHL with Hartford somewhere along the line. He has gotten worse. His skills aren't great. He's not particularly quick, but look, I think he's an NHL player. I guess that's debatable, but I think that he can definitely be a serviceable fourth line center who is responsible, can kill penalties. But yeah, I mean, the offensive juice is just completely gone for a guy who was a late first round pick. So with Howden, I'm not too upset that he was traded. I think most Ranger fans feel this way, and maybe it speaks to the fact that Chris Drury isn't a fan of Howden's, as maybe the Gorton Quinn regime may have been more fond of Howden, or maybe they would have got rid of him as well. But Howden, I'll be interested to see how he does with Vegas, but was certainly happy to see that trade, and I think a fourth round return is more than fair. You weren't going to get anything more than that. So he is now out of the picture, which now leads me to the protected list. So the only question was going to be who was the seventh forward. Now, the good thing for the Rangers is they're set up very nicely. A lot of their players were exempt. And this happens with first and second year players. So Igor Shesterkin, exempt. Adam Fox, also exempt. Lafreniere, Kakko, Keandre Miller. So don't even have to worry about them. So in terms of the protected list, the goalie was Georgiev. Defensemen, Trouba, Lindgren, and Hayek. So not a whole lot there, to be honest. The fact that Hayek was protected says everything you need to know. So I wasn't sure maybe if they were going to acquire a defenseman, but there was really no need to in the sense of the protected list. And then the forwards are where things would get somewhat interesting, and kind of the one question mark that I had that was answered. So the obvious six guys that were going to be protected were Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, Buchnevich, Strome, and Hedel. In the seventh spot, as it turned out, Howden was in that mix, but then he got traded. So it was going to come down to Gauthier, Blackwell, and Rooney. And what's interesting is that Kevin Rooney was the seventh forward that was protected. And I think that probably comes as a surprise to a lot. I think that the front runner was probably Blackwell. It felt that way. And in terms of Blackwell or Rooney, it's an interesting case because they both were acquired at the same time. Contractually, it's very similar, around the same age, journeyman type, who had pretty effective years at the Rangers. Blackwell was a guy who had more offensive upside, not a huge guy, but someone that is versatile. Definitely was more of a winger with the Rangers, but he can play center. Got a lot of power play time, a little bit of penalty kill time, and he was effective. He played a lot with Panarin and Strome, and he kind of replaced Fost in that role as kind of to me, he's not quite like Jesper Fost, but I could see where you could draw some similarities. But Kevin Rooney is where they decided to go with a center, which is always going to be more valuable than a winger. And again, Blackwell was used more on the wing. Rooney is center. He played 54 out of 56 games last year. Let's remember that Rooney made the team last year, whereas Blackwell did not. Eventually, Blackwell made his way onto the team, probably, I guess, maybe 2 weeks in or so, and made a really big impact. But Rooney was there the whole time. And he kind of took that Brett Howden role. See, I find it interesting. They trade away Howden and they protect Rooney. It shows what they think of him. He was a guy that was part of that penalty kill crew. It was really, to me, Zibanejad, Buchnevich as one pair, and Rooney and Howden as the other pair most of the time. So Rooney, I don't have that much of a problem with it. Look, could you have gone Blackwell? Sure. But I think this was a close call for all three. I think this is going to work out all right. Now, the other player is Julien Gauthier. Gauthier is more of an upside guy. Gauthier had, I would say, of the three, the least successful season. He was scratched a lot. I think he played about 30 games, so about half of the games that were played. I think fans like him, and I like what his upside could be, but I think on this team that is full of talented young wingers, he's a little redundant, even if he does perform. So now the question becomes, the Rangers are going to lose one of those two, I believe, barring something unforeseen. And I will do, the next episode is likely going to be on who the Rangers lose to the Kraken. And the question is, do they go with Blackwell, who's more of a little older, but kind of a late bloomer, and someone like us who's more of a versatile, gritty type of player, or Gauthier, who has that upside, younger, a lot of skill, offensive skill. And what's interesting about Gauthier is that Ron Francis, who's the GM of Seattle, drafted Gauthier in Carolina. So there are ties there. So I could see that going either way. It's like whatever it is. To me, there wasn't much distinguishing between Rooney and Blackwell and Gauthier. So they're in a good spot. But yeah, again, the things to recap were Goodrow, the rights to Goodrow. So, and where that goes. Now, Seattle could choose Goodrow as well, but typically I don't think you're going to see Seattle going after unrestricted free agents. But if they did do that, then that would be the pick. Like, in effect, if they took Goodrow, which I don't think will happen, then the Rangers basically traded away a seventh just so they didn't take anyone from their roster, in effect. So, however you want to slice it, it's all good. But, excited for Goodrow. Honestly, happy that Howden got traded. And Kevin Rooney, I'm fine with that. I'm not up in arms. Let's just put it that way. Would I have preferred Blackwell or Gauthier? Maybe. But I think that Rooney definitely provides a key element, and that is the grit, kind of the sandpaper mentality the Rangers have been lacking. So this ended up being a lot more of a busy sort of trade deadline-esque situation before these lists were released. And now you're going to see some side deals with Seattle. Should be a lot more news coming in the next week or two. So we're going to be doing a lot more episodes, and we will find out soon who the Rangers lose to the Seattle Kraken and if there's any fallout beyond that.